What's up everyone, I'm Twisted and today I will be reacting to Hwei's bio as well as his champion insights, his voiceover and the article that was released about his voiceover. I haven't read anything yet and I've tried to stay spoiler free, but Hwei's writer has confirmed that he has nothing to do with demons besides the golden demon himself, Kata Jin. So there goes my theory, but that's okay, because that probably means that the Convergence note was teasing something else. Maybe some of Fiddlestick's followers when it eventually releases in LOR? Who knows? Alright, let's start with his bio. Hwei, the visionary, calm and chaos leave everything on the canvas. So related champions Jin, Shen and Zed, makes sense. And he's from Ionia, we already knew that. Hwei is a brooding painter who creates brilliant art in order to confront Ionia's criminals and comfort their victims. Beneath his melancholy roils a torn, emotional mind, haunted by both the vibrant visions of his imagination and the gruesome memories of his temple massacre. Hwei seeks to understand this light and dark, which drives him inevitably toward the artist who unravel him. With paintbrush and palette, Hwei shapes endless possibilities as he draws ever closer to earning closure or embracing despair. Alright, so we kinda knew this from the articles that I reacted to a couple days ago. I'm really interested to see what's his connection to Jin, right? Because Jin is obviously the artist mentioned here. In northwest Ionia, the island of Koyan once stood beautiful and serene. Among its golden sands, seasonal bazaar, and quaint mill town sat the temple of Koyan. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Koyan? An ancient and renowned conservatory for the arts. So I'm not sure where this is located. Probably around Navori, right? Considering his connections with Jin, Zed, and Shen, I think that area of Navori, Phalor sorta makes sense. Lukai Hwei was born to inherit this temple, alright? So the writer has confirmed that his first name is Hwei, Lukai is a family name. Kind and precocious, Hwei spent his childhood putting to canvas his wild daydreams, which exaggerated the world around him into surreal, fantastical sights. He knew these visions differed from reality, but through them he saw life itself as art. So connected was Hwei to the shades of the world that even his eye color shifted in hue to reflect his mind and mood. Okay, so his eyes are kinda like a mood ring. Hwei expressed his vibrant imagination through paint magic, a medium that influenced the emotions of its audience. As such, it required strict control and discipline, lest it overpower both mental perceptions and bodily sensations. Among its current practitioners, those unable or unwilling to control their art endangered themselves and the community, and were banished from Koyan. Despite these precepts, young Hwei indulged his imagination. In a demonstration for the temple masters, he recreated Koyan's sea. As paint flowed around the canvas, however, his control ebbed. Emotion crashed through him, wild and fathomless as an ocean, and he surrounded himself to its beauty. His visions turned black, his last memory the awestruck master's drowning. Hwei awoke days later, surrounded by his masters, alive but infuriated. They would not exile the temple's heir, but they stressed his responsibilities. Hwei was horrified but fascinated by the depths of his power, and he craved to see more. Thus, by day, he upheld Koyan's conventions, but alone at night, he pushed the boundaries, driven to explore the extent of his power. In time, this practice focused the intensity of Hwei's imagination, allowing him to manifest a palette that flowed with magical paint. Well into adulthood, Hwei mastered his craft. Yeah, another thing that was confirmed is that Hwei is in his early 30s. And with passion and humility, he prepared to inherit his birthright, surrounded by the respect and affection of his peers. But part of his mind remained forever shrouded at nightfall, and so it remained until the temple received the visiting artist, Kata Jin. Wait, so the temple is just letting Kata Jin visit? That's a bit suspicious, right? Over a gilded summer, Hwei accompanied Jin, guiding him around Koyan. They often exchanged their creative perspectives, and, respecting their differences, Hwei recognized Jin's virtuosity and valued their time together. But the night before Jin's departure, the man challenged Hwei. Jin sensed that the pieces Hwei showed others were forced facades, and he wanted to see a real performance. Hwei tried to deny it, but his eyes betrayed him. Flooded by the years spent creating meaningless art, his imagination begged catharsis. So Hwei painted. Decades of practice guided his brush. The night came alive, colored by the brilliant infinity of his mind. Emotions washed over him, harmonious and visceral, and Hwei welcomed them. Sharing these forbidden visions for another exhilarated him. Connection, inspiration, and unfettered creation. Jin witnessed all. Afterward, with eyes alight and tone inscrutable, he said farewell, stating he would be moving on tomorrow to watch the lotuses bloom. Surely that doesn't mean something else. At dawn, Hwei and his fellow artists awoke to a series of tragedies. Yeah, obviously that's what Jin was mentioning, right? First, 4 historic paintings destroyed. Second, an arrangement of 4 bodies, the masters that Hwei had almost killed in his youth. Third, the fiery eruption of the temple's 4 lowest floors. Okay, so we got 4 paintings, 4 bodies, 4 floors, and since these were the masters that Hwei had almost killed, this obviously means that Jin is targeting Hwei in some way, or that Hwei is at least part of Jin's plan to do. Amid the flames, Hwei imagined the air electric with color. Everything that lived within him bled outward. It was terrifying. It was beautiful. It was art. Realizing its dark potential of destruction, devastation, and torment, Hwei felt the same horror and fascination he had in his youth. The temple quickly collapsed into ruins, with Hwei emerging as its only survivor. See, exactly, like the fact that Hwei was the only survivor was definitely in Jin's plan, right? Not to say that he did something to let Hwei survive, Jin just knew that Hwei was going to use his powers and survive, right? Exhausted and guilt-ridden, he mourned. Yet his imagination overflowed, reliving every moment of the disaster. During the day, Hwei and the villagers from the mill town held burials. At night, he revisited the ashen-grey wreckage and painted, his palette taking the shape of Koyan's crest, the same worn over his heart. Okay, so I believe that's what we can see in his splash art and in his model, right? On one such night, Hwei found the remnants of a trap beneath the rubble. One petaled like a lotus flower. Realizing who'd wreaked this havoc, a cascade of emotions engulfed Hwei. Fear, sorrow, betrayal, awe. A question burned within him. Why? Yeah, like, I'm guessing that at this point in time, Kadajin wasn't well known as a murderer yet, but did he want the answer? Or would it be safer to suppress this need? He could stay here with his people, as their heir, help them rebuild, or... Bearing little more than his paintbrush and palette, Hwei left his island and his people behind. Damn, the grip that Jin had on this man. In the time since, Hwei has learned that the answers he seeks arise through revealing the full extent of his arts to others. He tracks down nefarious individuals in Ionia's darkest corners, unleashing scenes of suffering upon them to understand his own well of pain. Yet he also reaches out to Ionia's victims, fellow witnesses, to create shared tranquility and reflection. Okay, I'm getting the vibe that is more like an anti-hero, right? Both the relentless artist rising from the ashes and the kind-hearted man from a once peaceful isle, Hwei faces the conflicting hues of Ionia and his own imagination. As he spirals deeper into the shadows, he lights a path, mind brimming with possibility. Which shade of himself will triumph, however, is yet to be seen. Alright, very interesting. Again, I assume that the 4th tragedy was supposed to be Hwei himself, right? His, I guess, awakening, right? Or maybe the 4th tragedy is yet to happen. That could also be the case. I can totally see Jin looking at Hwei and thinking, okay, this is someone that could potentially in the future become someone like me, so let me set the stage for them. Let me plant the seed and wait for them to bloom. I think that's what Jin is sort of planning. He set the stage for Hwei to become someone like him. Alright, now let's check out Hwei's champion insights. Every match can be a masterpiece. For many artists and creatives, the need to create suppresses the need for much else. Putting whatever is in your mind on paper or canvas feels essential, like breathing. This is exceedingly true for Hwei, League's newest champion, a mid-lane mage who paints the artist's visions that fill his head. But instead of painting on canvas, Hwei's works are dynamic, living images that affect anyone who witnesses them. With his paintbrush, Hwei wields destruction or support, controlling the thoughts and emotions of those around him. Again, that's a reference to the fact that he uses some kind of magic that does influence people's emotions, that was mentioned in his bio. He may not have a sword or gun, but don't underestimate the might of this brooding artist and his brush. More than meets the eye. The beginning of Hwei is a tale of three pitches: a paint mage, a brooding anti-hero, okay, so that was the feeling that I got from reading his bio, and a humanoid male mid laner without purple skin or an exoskeleton. Okay, I'm assuming they are referencing Malzahar and Victor. The Archmage idea had been brewing for a while, and a number of rioters contributed to shaping the concept. Yeah, I believe like years ago there were some ideas for some kind of mage that had spells where you could actually draw with your cursor. I wonder if that's what they are referring to here, or if this is just a completely new idea, right? These are some really cool thumbnails. As soon as the possibility of an artistic mage was on the table, everyone gravitated to it, says narrative writer Isamari, Orchidian de Leon. This is an idea that's been of interest for a long time, but never yet executed, so I feel really lucky for this to be the first new champion I've contributed to. The champions team also wanted to end the year on a complex note, introducing a champ with a high skill ceiling. Okay, so this confirms that Hwei is the last champion of 2024, which I think it's what most people were expecting already. But nailing down a difficult to master kit that fit within Hwei's art thematic wasn't easy. 3 game designers had a hand in the process, each building on the last iteration. But something about it wasn't quite working. So before the champion concept was put on the shelf in favor of other ideas, the team decided to try an about face on his gameplay. More on all of this later. As a result, his narrative and art evolved as well. Hwei's visions and magic became more recognizable images and were infused with bright color, clearly communicating his new abilities. Armed with an Ionian paintbrush and a colorful palette, his power is fueled by his own artistic expression. I've been secretly waiting in the shadows for when we could do an art mage, laughs art director Jem Lonewingy Lim. We wanted to do a spell mixer mage, but being an elementalist or a druid had already been done several times, and the art thematic was an unique take for this kind of archetype for gameplay. Hwei's inherent power bursts forth when he's painting, manifesting his colorful washes of pigment and imagery. His source of power isn't his brush, it's the artistic ability within. Hwei is not a warrior or a swordsman, so we didn't want to treat the brush as if that's what's elevating him. The power is all internal, and for a mage specifically, I think that kind of internal inherent power makes more sense, says Orchidian. I really like the multiple layers of clothing, right? I think that was a really good idea. Hwei's outward appearance hints at the creative power churning inside of him. This sad fellow is mostly muted in color, save for his powerful palette, and his eyes will change color based on his mood, a feature he's unable to control. He chronically and magically needs to share how he's feeling and what he's envisioning. It's a thematic link to his source of power, which is the power of expression, and holding nothing back from what's inside you, says Orchidian. There's more than meets the eye for someone like him, adds Longwinnie. You don't know that there are beautiful things happening in his mind and how he sees reality. That's Impressionism. And how he combines fiction and reality, like realistic experience and also imagination. That's Surrealism. Hwei is a genius at his craft. He's genuinely one of the best artists of his time, but he would never admit that. Orchidian laughs. But that level of commitment comes with a sacrifice. Lonewinging conveyed Hwei's dedication to painting through his somewhat disheveled appearance. The time and effort Hwei puts into his art leaves him little time to pay attention to how he looks to the outside world. Though he'd prefer you focus on the art over the artist, he still manages to have that, just rolled out of the painting studio, sophistication. He doesn't think about how he needs to properly present himself to be accepted. He's just like, I don't care, I'm just into the things I like to do, laughs Lonewingy. We have characters where it's like, it's obvious she likes to dress up or he likes to put his hair this way, but Hwei is ready to give everything for his passion, which is painting and artistry, all in the imagination. Hwei's early life was spent in a temple on a tiny Ionian island of Koyan, mastering the art of painting. Interesting that they mentioned tiny Ionian island. That might be their way of saying, hey, it's not on the map because it's really, really small. Trust us. The famed artistic temple in a small mill town is a place for pupils to learn the precision and balance necessary to wield the power of artistic magic. But when Hwei attempts to combine his intense imagination with his talent for painting, the temple masters tell him he must rein in his abilities in favor of more traditional practices. Alright, I assume this is the temple. I still don't know why there's like Hylian writing. I'm guessing the devs didn't really thought that one through, but yeah, interesting. Oh yeah, concept art of Hwei's temple on Koyan. He ends up hurting people with the force of his expression in his youth, but he is darkly intrigued by that force and feels the artistic drive to explore it, explains Orchidian. So he lives out his life in this duality between painting what is expected of him and what he has learned versus painting alone in his extremely expressive and emotional style. I feel like this is like a parallel for a lot of artists when they are like in art school or even after they get some kind of job in whatever industry they are working. Right? You have like the art that you need to do because you need to do it, whether it's for a college project or because it's your work, right? And then there's the art that you actually enjoy doing, the art that, you actually resonate with. Hwei's imagination is ceaseless, so he must practice his true art in secret, fascinated and fearful of his own power. Still, he thrives at the temple, a well-respected member of the community, while hiding the full extent of his power. Later on in life, another remarkable artist arrives at the temple to hone his craft. He gets close to Hwei over the course of his time on Koyan, but his visit concludes in a crescendo of destruction and death, forever altering Hwei's path. Exactly, I think forever altering Hwei's path is the fourth tragedy, or is part of the fourth tragedy. Jin, you open my eyes to so much, I won't spare you from any of it. I assume this is one of his quotes, I'll be checking out those later, but I assume that since one of the things that Hwei does is show evildoers the pain that they cause, I assume that's what he means with this quote. Hwei did not know Jin's true nature until it was too late, explains Orchidian, and that complexity carries through when the atrocity happens. This person betrayed me and is not at all what I thought, but at the same time witnessed and understood my art on a level that I hadn't allowed anyone to before, and showed me something that empowered it. Oh, this is so toxic. This feels so toxic. Following Jin's attack on the temple, Hwei is devastated. He wants answers, setting out into Greater Ionia to seek out closure to ease his mind. As he tries to make sense of his experiences, he is confrontational and intense, but kind and empathetic, solemn and broody, but not defeated. Hwei has experienced major loss, but emerged out of it still as an artist, not as an avenger or a cynic. Through his art, he navigates his deep sorrow and inner turmoil, says Orchidian. Complexity is simply the nature of Hwei, from his skits to his personality to his backstory. He has a darkness within him that recognizes Jin's forceful, limitless expression. Exactly, and I think this was what Jin saw in Hwei, right? This was what led Jin to cause the three tragedies, with the fourth, in my opinion, being the blossoming or the blooming of Hwei. But Hwei's empathy and kindness allowed him to hold onto his inner light. These might be where Jin failed, right? Unless Jin has some greater plan and is playing 4D chess here, I think he was expecting Hwei to become more like him. Unfortunately for Jin, Hwei is very empathetic and kind. Or maybe Jin knew that too. Maybe Jin just wanted some kind of rival. I'm really intrigued by it. This is not a character you can overread, says Orchidian. The depth of play is purposeful as it is depth of narrative. It was fun for me to write and dig into all the layers that he presents, and I hope that it's equally as fun for players to dig into what makes him tick and try to put together the nuances. He is also not a character you can overplay, so while you're piecing together your intricate lore theories, that's exactly what I'm doing right now, you can make some 300 IQ plays to match. Alright, so this is the part about his gameplay. I'm not going to be looking into it because I don't think there's going to be much mention to the lore, and I guess that's it. It's been a while since the Champions team put so many years of design experience into a champ. With his versatile palette of abilities, Hwei invokes a new level of skill expression in the mid lane and League in general. The League team is always looking for new ways to help players illustrate their mastery and skill expression on the Rift. Hopefully, the visionary of Ionia's formidable artistry helps you do just that. Alright, this was a very cool article. However, just like with Briar and Nafiri, I feel like it doesn't really add much. Like everything that they tell here, you could basically get just by reading his bio, and that's a bit worrying because the last 3 new champions obviously didn't receive a color story, which makes them feel really shallow. Like even Hwei here, who seems to be a much more complex character than Nafiri or especially than Briar, right? There's not much to him here because we don't really get to see a story, right? Like a bio is just a very condensed version of the events that happen, right? We don't see him talking with Jin, we don't see him interacting, and we can't get an idea of how their personalities are similar or different, right? And certainly a Champion Insights post is not going to fix that. Alright, so now let's check out his quotes, and shout out to Skin Spotlight.
I won't spare you from any of it.
Okay, again, it seems that Hwei is intrigued as to why Jin did what he did, but he also does not see him as a good person, right? Obviously, he empathized with Jin in some way because Jin was the only person that really understood a part of Hwei. So I think he respects Jin, or at least admires him in some way because of that, but he's still very much aware that Jin is not a good person, right? I think such an empathetic character wouldn't see someone destroying a whole building, killing a bunch of people, and be like, yeah, but he's alright.
I know your power, Syndra. The depths of your hurt and rage.
Alright, this is a cool quote. Syndra doesn't really get many champions interacting with her. Her story is very isolated from all of the other Ionian characters and almost everything that's happening in Ionia at the moment. But yeah, if someone was going to empathize with Syndra, it makes sense to be Hwei, right? Hwei also had a very strong power, and people around him were sort of fearful of that power and wanted him to suppress it. There are some parallels that you could draw with Syndra, besides the fact that they were both on an island with a temple. But yeah, really cool to see Syndra being acknowledged here.
Something still grieves in you, Ari. White like clouds and ice.
Again, he's empathizing with another champion. Obviously, Ari has grown a lot since what happened in the past with her lover and with everyone that she stole the memories from, right? But growing doesn't mean that you still don't grieve or, feel some of the things that you felt, right? It just means that you've learned from them, you've moved on in a way from them, but they are still there.
Shrouded in twilight hues.
I wonder what he means by this. Obviously, he's talking about day and night. You got a reference to twilight. We got a reference to rise, as in sunrise, and set, as in sunset. I assume he's talking about Akali joining forces with Chen again and actually becoming the Feast of Shadow that she was supposed to be. Twilight, obviously, Eye of Twilight, right? Yeah, interesting. I'm not entirely sure what he means by this, but it's an interesting quote.
Where do you fall?
Yeah, I assume he's talking about balance here, right? A lot of cultures in Ionia, for example, the Kinko, focus on this balance between light and darkness.
What would our families think?
Alright, now that's a cool parallel because Irelia turned the dances of her family into ways of manipulating her blades to kill Noxians, right? She basically turned an art form into a weapon, and Hwei did the same thing. He used the technique of his masters, his artistic magic or whatever, to fight against people. Not that we've seen him fighting or even have a story of him fighting, we just know that he fights people. Yeah, I'm a bit salty that he doesn't have a color story either. I don't think I have anything interesting to say here. It's cool that he is acknowledging the spirit of Ionia and Karma herself.
Cain.
He's obviously mentioning blue and red Cain here. Blue being the path where Cain manages to overcome Rast, and red being Rast taking over Cain. And bleeding probably refers to the fact that these are two futures that could happen, but at the moment Cain and Rast are basically fighting each other.
Wild and wise.
Right, this is another cool quote. Just happy that Canon is being acknowledged. As far as I remember, Canon is someone who, if he sees someone that needs help, he just rushes in, right? But he's also someone who's been around for a long time, right? He's older than Akali, he's older than Shen. He's just someone that has a lot of wisdom and experience.
Lee Sin, this piece will reach your spirit.
Again, another quote that I don't have much to say about it. It's just a cool reference to Lee Sin and the spirit of the dragon. Alright, so this is a sad one. Hwei's temple was destroyed by Jin, and his masters were all killed. In a way, this was sort of Hwei's fault. Obviously, not really his fault, but it was the fact that he was there and that he met Jin that led to all of that. And I think Hwei probably knows that to an extent. And obviously, the Wuju were wiped out because of Mastery. Because Mastery used the Wuju technique in a way that he shouldn't, in a way that he was warned not to do. He had good intentions, but that was the reason that the Wuju were killed by the Noxians, right? And in the same way, Hwei used his magic in a way that he was warned not to do, and he showed that to Kata Jin. And let's be honest, Jin probably already knew all of this even before Hwei showed him that night, right? So yeah, there are a couple of parallels between Hwei and Mastery that I hadn't realized.
Let me into your circle, Set. You have information I need.
Alright, now this is another one of those throwaway lines that we probably are not going to learn anything about because the lore for it is never going to come out. Briere also had one of these, which were her interactions with Talon. Also, speaking of which, Briere had so few interactions with champions, yet Hwei is interacting with almost every single Ionian champion. That's really interesting. But yeah, I don't know what he means by this. I don't think anyone knows what he means by this besides the rioters. Yeah, hopefully we learn sooner than later.
Shen, you've grown blind to sorrow, to joy, to life.
That one is sad. That one is sad. And I think this is basically what we see in the Z comic, right? Just the way that Jin messed up both Zed and Shen is just, yeah.
Sona, your music is your voice. Speak with me.
Alright, another quote that I don't have much to add onto. Just cool to see Sona being acknowledged as a champion that was originally from Ionia.
Misery loves company, doesn't it, little one?
I think this is just a reference to the fact that Vex is basically an emo Yordle. There are a couple of thematic overlaps with Hwei. Also, they are both mid laners, so him having a quote toward her is not that surprising.
Guilt covers us layer by layer, Yasuo.
Again, another quote that I don't really have much to add on to. Guilt is obviously a big part of Yasuo's character, because he failed to protect his master, he killed his own brother, so yeah.
We carry our burdens with us, Yone. My mind, your mask.
I think this is a reference to the fact that Yone's mask is obviously tied to his Azakana, and his Azakana is tied to a specific fear that he has, or a specific negative emotion that wasn't really confirmed yet, as far as I know. So yeah, that would be his burden, right?
We have a lot in common, Zed.
I think he's talking about Jin here, as well as the fact that neither Hwei or Zed are really heroes, but they aren't really villains either, right? They are anti-heroes. But yeah, Jin fucked up both of their lives. So yeah, they have a lot in common. Hwei is, again, using a technique in a way that he probably shouldn't, and Zed is using a technique that was forbidden, so some similarities, though this is probably a reach.
Jin, that was...
I think he respects Jin as an artist because they are able to like see the world in a similar way, right? He is able to understand Jin's artistic vision, and Jin is able to understand his, right?
Close your eyes, Jin. Lie by the fire you started.
Again, he clearly knows that Jin is not a good person. Okay, so now this is an interesting one. Is he suggesting that Cain and Rust work together, right? Because there's only one Cain, right? When he's talking about yourselves, he's talking about Cain and Rust. It would be really cool if it turns out that there is a third path that Cain can choose. That for whatever reason, Rust and Cain allied themselves with one another instead of being forced to one day overpower each other. That's interesting. I kind of like that idea, actually.
Something dark clings to me, has always lived in me.
Again, I'm pretty sure this is what Jin saw in Hwei, and Hwei leaving the temple and the island was all part of Jin's plan.
There is light in me. I can't lose sight of it. Not when you draw out my darkness, Jin.
Yeah, Jin is just a bad, toxic influence for Hwei, I guess.
Ionia has an underworld, black as ink. I stare into the well, and it stares back.
I wonder what he's talking about. I guess he is being like very poetic here, and it means that there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of negative emotions in Ionia, which is not really something that you think about when you think about Ionia, right? You think about magical, colorful land spaces and, people living peacefully with nature, but there's also a lot of suffering, right? Especially following the first Noxian invasion. Like there was a point in time where the spirit blossoms didn't even bloom, right? The land was grieving, the land was suffering, and everyone in it as well. Alright, the remaining quotes were just generic gameplay quotes, nothing too interesting to talk about. And there was also released an article about the voice of Hwei. I'm not entirely sure how many interesting lore bits are in it, so I'm going to be taking a look at it, and if I find anything cool, I'll let you know. Alright, here's something cool. There are two routes of thought, a dark and a light version, representing Hwei's conflicted mind and the emotional journeys he could go through. The lines fire at different points of a game. First move, ranking your ult for the first time, then ranking your ult for the second time. And fun fact, an addendum is added to each line if Jin is in the same game as an ally or enemy, reflecting the significant role he plays in Hwei's story. Alright, so we saw this in the quotes, now they make a little bit more sense as to what dark and light meant.
Way, just to remind you that also when it comes to Jin and when it comes to confronting enemies, and in this case, like confronting a player who's banned you, there's never going to be any kind of feeling of vengeance or anger about it. It's like still trying to create a connection still. So that's where this kind of tone of understanding comes from.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. There isn't really, I guess, anger or revenge behind Hwei's intentions. Interesting. And that was it for Hwei's voice. The composer for Hwei's theme left a cool comment under the video where he explains the inspiration behind the theme, and I also think this is pretty interesting. I'm not gonna read it through, but again, I will also leave his theme down in the description if you wanna check it out. And that was it for Hwei. I think he's a cool character, not really my type of character, but I think the team definitely managed to create a character that stands out from all the other 100 and something champions. I think they did a good job, and I do think that his perspective on the world and his backstory and his connection to Jin is quite interesting. Again, just like with the other champions that we got this year, I just feel like there's a lack of actual story here, right? What we got is really, really surface level, even with the quotes. We can see his personality, we can see how he addresses and empathizes with other champions, but we need a story, right? For Hwei, we didn't even get a cinematic. We got a champion trailer, which is not a cinematic, let's be honest. Unless he gets into Legends of Runeterra, I don't expect to see him again anytime soon, and that's quite unfortunate. But yep, this is Hwei. Let me know down below what you think about him. Do you like him? Do you not like him? Does your brain hurt as much as mine when you look at all of his abilities? Let me know down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.